Scripture this morning is Matthew 4, 1 through 11. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of Man, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him.
Good morning. It is so good to be with you this morning. Especially the drive was so beautiful and so sunny. I live in Akron, so it was really with a lot of police cars, so I couldn't speak. But it is good to be here, and it is good to bring you greetings from our 146 congregations in Ohio Northeast area. Our congregation all the way to the west is Vermilion, and all the way to the east is the Pennsylvania border, down to Steubenville, and all the way down to Powhatan Point, which is next to West Virginia border. And then to the west, we have Strasburg and Coshocton and some of the Amish areas. So we do serve a large area of Ohio. So 146 congregations today are worshiping in their own churches. We are in covenant with them, and so I bring you greetings from them to you as we worship together as well. So it was in 2007 when I made my first pilgrimage to historic Armenia. By now, most of you know that I am an immigrant. I was born and raised in Syria after there was a genocide of Armenians in the flailing Ottoman Empire. So my father was born in today's Turkey, which used to be Armenia, a long, long time ago. And yes, the earthquake was in those areas. And it was in the east of the country where a small part of Turkey bordered with Armenia that I experienced some very powerful things. I had moments that overwhelmed me that I didn't know how to explain. I would have moments that I would burst into tears. I would have moments when I would just laugh. And the variety of emotions that I lived through, I just had not expected. So when you go to, I guess, a pilgrimage or figure out what your ancestry was, it is not an easy work. It is emotional, it is difficult, but it is good. So as we went from one town to another, I went with a group, and each person had come from a different part of the country. So it was custom-made trip because each person remembered where their family came from. Eventually, we ended up near Mount Ararat. All of you know Mount Ararat, right? Because of Noah's Ark. And I remembered all those songs and poetry and stories that I heard as a child about Mount Ara. That used to be part of ancient Armenia. Then it was amazing to see it with its snowy top and with its twin masses right next to it. From there, we entered the city of Van, which is famous for its lake. So the lake is Lake Van, and with a lot of little islands, and several of them have old monasteries and churches on them. So when we were in Lake Van, I kept feeling some kind of connection to the land. I couldn't explain it once again. I didn't know all the feelings I was feeling. And it was amazing, and it was scary, and it was lovely, and it was confusing, all at the same time. And then I learned that the ancient name of Lake Van was Lake Nayiri. So I thought, is that why I feel such a connection to this lake? And in the vicinity was a town called Ani, and Ani was known for 1,001 churches. As you probably know, in ancient parts of the world, cities were, spaces with fences around them, and so usually they were high up on the hill, so the enemy couldn't get there. And so Ani was this huge sprawl of ancient churches that were ruins now, but were standing. So as a group, we would go in there, we would sing the Lord's Prayer. There's a very, the Lord's Prayer is translated into Armenian, and so there's an Armenian song version of it. So every church that we would enter, we would sing that. And then we would all be crying at the same time. So the experience was so emotional, so overwhelming. I just kept thinking, what do I call this experience? What do you call an experience that is so non-describable in human words? And that is when I settled on calling this experience sacred. Because I couldn't think of any other word that described it so well. So what makes something sacred? It is the presence of the one who created us, the God who loves us, the God who connects us, not only to God's self, but also to one another, to the world, to the land, because you see, our bodies are flesh. They come from the land. Our bodies are connected to wherever we are and whatever breath we take, because God is also our breath. The Holy Spirit is also our wind. The Holy Spirit is also our fire. So increasingly, this idea became real for me, and I thought, okay, that was a sacred experience. So every Sunday, when I am in any church, I wonder if we come to church for sacred experiences. I wonder if we come here because we want meaning in our life, because we want to find something beyond this, what feels like a crazy and violent world. I wonder if we come to find that God who is love, who sometimes we forget during our week, but we come here on Sunday morning to connect with God, to have the sacred experiences that we seek, or our hearts seek. So this first Sunday of Lent, we remember that Lent is a tough time. It's a time of desert and the wilderness, time of grief and ashes, time of darkness and death. And many of us don't like it because it's sad. Who wants to go through grief and sadness and the desert and the wilderness? So today I want us to think of Lent, however, as a sacred time, a sacred journey, a time when we connect with God, and a time when we reflect about the transcendent that transcends everyday craziness, and a time when we stop worrying, a time when we let go of anxiety, a time when we would focus, a time when we would find perspective, a time when we would find meaning. I believe that's what Jesus did in the wilderness when he encountered Satan. So, Satan actually at the time, or in the biblical story, was the personification of the devil. So he was named as Satan because Satan literally means an adversary. He is the adversary who plots against people, who opposes, who obstructs, and he becomes a barrier. So usually a Satan is described, or it literally means, someone who throws something on your way and distracts you, or makes you change your way, or go a different direction you didn't mean to go. So Satan really is a barrier and obstruction, and something that is thrown near your way to distract you. Now we understand this concept because we know sometimes we would go going a specific way and we have good intentions and we're going to do some good things, and something happens and we turn around. So something is thrown on your way and you stumble and you can no longer journey as you intended. This is kind of what happened to Jesus. He had gone there to actually 40 days, 40 nights. I don't know how he stayed hungry for 40 days, but so be it. 40 days usually in the biblical story are used for time of grief and sadness and death. And then 50 days were about life and resurrection and joy. And so Jesus is in the wilderness, but Satan, no matter what he throws in front of Jesus, does not lose focus. Amazing. Many of us today have ADD. Many of us are so distracted with technology. Many of us are distracted with so many of the things that happens in life. And we lose focus. We lose direction. And Jesus did it. It's amazing. So that's what I believe Lent calls us to do. It calls us to focus on the path, and it calls us to walk the path and to not lose focus and direction. You may remember Jacob's story. Remember when he was on his way to somewhere? And he stopped on his way and he saw he had a dream. Remember Jacob's ladder? So in his dream he saw the ladder, and when he woke up, he realized that God spoke to him in that dream. And he called the place Bethel, God's house, God's home, because that was his experience. So God can be experienced. God can be encountered. And those places are what we call sacred. Because does God live in the sanctuary? God lives everywhere. This is God's world. So in that sense, everywhere is sacred. And everywhere can be a place where you connect with God. So sacred is not a place. It's an experience. Just like God is not only a person, but God is an experience. So we call God Father. Why? Because we experience God like as if God is. Some people like to call God Mother. Others get upset. But calling God Mother doesn't mean God becomes a mother. It means you experience God as a mother. We call Jesus the living water. Doesn't mean Jesus is water. It means that we experience Jesus, who quenches our thirst as if that Jesus is water. So what does all this mean for the church? What does sacredness mean for the church? What does it mean as a Lenten church? So I don't have to tell you that the church is changing. Anybody who disagrees with that, put your hands up. The church continues to change as the world changes. And it seems the church has gone through monumental change in the 2,000 years that it has been here. Phyllis Tickle, a theologian, wrote a book a couple of years ago where she suggested that the church as we know it, the global church, the big church, not just you, goes through a rummage sale every 500 years. Now what does she mean by a rummage sale? That every 500 years, the world has changed so much that we open up everything. How do you make a rummage sale? You know, people bring you the things they don't use anymore. Or they open up their closets. They find things no longer work for them. And so that's what the church does. Every 500 years, the church looks at everything it believes, and then perhaps gives up a few things and says, that belief no longer works in the world in which we live. So even some of the biblical concepts that don't make sense to us, because they were 2,000 years ago, so we reinterpret them for today. So the first 500 years of the church began, of course, in around the year 3000. And those were the times when people were known as the people of the way, because they followed Jesus. Then, in year 3000, Caesar, Constantine or Augustus, I always mix this up. Anyway, he made religion, or Christianity, a state religion. So that's when people started writing creeds and faith statements so that everybody would believe the same to be a Christian. Then in 1054, which is 500 years after, the Council of Chalcedon discussed the core of being Christian, and that divided Christianity into two sections, Western and Eastern. So many of you know that in the eastern part of the world, Christianity is Orthodox. And in the western part of the world, of course, it's Catholic or Protestant. But Protestantism wasn't born then yet. So in 1517, Protestantism was born, or the Protestant Reformation happened, and the West became more Protestant, the East remained Orthodox. And today, in the year 2000, which is 500 years later, we are experiencing another garage sale, another Reformation, another transformation. But you know what? It doesn't have a name yet. We don't know what to call it. We just know that the church is changing because the world is changing. Because if the church isn't relevant to the world in which it lives, it doesn't make it. It means that people don't connect to the faith. So all this makes us realize that churches need to have a clear focus and a clear sense of direction. And what might that mean for Hearts Grove Community United Church of Christ? It means that a focus is always helpful to have. A sense of who you are, what your purpose is, and what you are doing here. One of the things I love about this church is that it's right in the center of town. No one can miss it. It's right here. And it's for the whole community. And all of us know that the church has a very specific calling and purpose. Churches are here to be a community of love. Churches are here so that people on the journey who follow Jesus can gather. Churches are here because they want to make a difference in the community and make the world a more loving place. That purpose never changes. But it helps churches when they have a focus and a direction so that they don't flounder, and so that when something is thrown on their way, they don't go the way they don't intend to go. I don't have to tell you that there are a huge number of churches in the United States of America, and that each of them is quite different. Now, you probably know of some churches that still don't allow women to preach or don't ordain. Other churches who don't believe in medicine. Others who don't welcome anyone who looks different. Others serve communion only to their members. Others who serve communion to anyone that comes in. Others, like Quakers, have worship services that they go sit and they're quiet for a whole hour. They don't talk. So all of these, and I know there is much more variety, of course, but all these churches have unique characteristics and they're different. I believe that is why churches need to be clear to who they are, so that people will know what kind of congregation you are, and if they want to be a part of that. So there's a variety of beliefs, rapidly changing world, and God is calling us to focus. And churches who don't have that focus often flounder. Many churches also, you know, in the United States are dying. Churches like you, however, who have a multi-generational community, even small ones, will continue to live. The ones who die are often churches that are in largely populated areas, where there are too many churches, and those who are left are over 80 perhaps. But in rural areas where we have churches, you all have multi-generational communities. You have children, you have youth, you have others who join you. So I did a little bit of research on Hartsgrove. You are the only church in Hartsgrove. And Hartsgrove has 1,530 population. The median age is 46. And one place it said it was 37, but I think that's Ashtabula County. And 51% of the population is married with children. So all this means that you have an opportunity for service. And you have opportunity to be a community place. So that is what Pastor Robin and I have been talking about. What the focus of this congregation can be, and how you guys can talk about that during this time of Lent, and make it your sacred journey as you connect with God, as you connect with one another, and as you connect with the larger community. So what is that focus? What is that purpose? Because the sacred is not just found in this place on Sunday morning. It could also be found down in the fellowship hall, out in the garden, or whatever that is, out in anywhere in the city and anywhere in rural areas. Because the world is God's home, and every moment that we experience God is a sacred moment.